It is so exciting for me to be back with you guys again. I got the call from your pastor asking if I could come over and fill in for him this Sunday, and that's always a great joy for me. And I've been following a little bit the series Crossing Over. It's been so good. And I said, do you want me to continue in that series since you're in the middle of it? He said, that'd be great. I've got many of the messages already planned out and set down. He said, but I don't have anything from Joshua chapter 24. Would you look at Joshua chapter 24? And I went, sure. I mean, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, is Joshua 24. We can do that. And then I spent some time this week in it, and I went, man, I know why he left town and had me preach this. Because this is one of those in-your-face messages. This is not one of the warm, fuzzy messages. This one is, if you feel convicted by the message today, then welcome to my world this week, okay? Because it has convicted me. But we come to a time in the life of the people of God when they've traveled a long ways. They've had many adventures. They've seen God move. They've been challenged. They've known sorrow and loss, and they've known victory and gain. They've had success. They've had failure. And Joshua gathers the people of God together, and he begins in Joshua chapter 24, reading verse 1. And Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, and he called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and their judges and their officers, and they presented themselves before God. Now understand, they had just finished dividing up the land, the promised land that God brought them into. They had spent years out on the desert, learning about God, finally beginning to trust Him, brought over into the promised land, and you've been studying all the battles they went through and all the life lessons they've learned. And now in this chapter, they're dividing up the land, and they're about to begin, for the first time in the life of most all of these people, a place where they're no longer nomadic desert dwellers. They're moving to a brand new stage in the life of the nation and in the life of their families. Joshua calls them together before God. It wasn't just a get-together, it was church. And he opens with about 12 verses of saying, remember God. And I gave you a land on which you had not labored, cities which you had not built. You have lived in them. You are eating of vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Joshua says, we are going to take some time, and we're going to remember the facts about your past. Because, as we all know, those who cannot remember the past are doomed to what? To repeat it. Now, Joshua didn't come up with that slogan, but he could have. Because they had just spent many extra years in the desert, because they came up to the edge of the promised land at one time, and they forgot about the God who had delivered them, who had been their support and their strength, and all they could see was giants in the land. So as they begin this next crossing over into a different part of the life of the children of Israel, Joshua says, we're going to stop and remember that we didn't come here by our own works or our own design. We're going to remember what God did. That's a good thing to do. You make better decisions when you do that. I mean, just in our own world, guys. How many of you would admit that your best decisions have sometime been born out of learning from your worst decisions? Anybody want to share a testimony? You don't have to do that. Usually some of our best decisions came from the fact that at some time in our past we made some really bad decisions, and we remembered and we learned from them. When you come to a place of crossing over, a place of moving forward to a new place in life, there's a need to remember the facts about your past so that you won't just keep circling in the desert. Joshua says, we're going to remember about who God was. It was him who brought us here, not ourselves. We were slaves before. We were held captive. And even when God brought the plagues and delivered us from them, even then we were about to go back into captivity, and he delivered us again. And then we were about to starve to death, and he brought down manna. And then we were about to die of thirst, and he opened water out of the side of a mountain. And these people came against us, and he delivered us, and he guided us, and our shoes did not wear out, and our clothes did not wear out. And God has always been our resource and our strength, and he is faithful. And at one time they came to the edge of the Jordan and they forgot how faithful God was, and all they saw were giants, and they never moved forward. So a whole new generation has to come into existence that will remember God. One of your greatest sources of courage in your life is to remember your past in the light of God. Perhaps today you need those words of encouragement. Perhaps today you need to take a moment and remember the God of your past. I left a space in your notes there for you to write down personal memories. I encourage you to do that. Do it now. It won't even offend me, okay? Or do it later. Or gather with your family and begin to make a list of how God has been faithful in your past. You'll have a good day when you do that. Last night I was at the hotel and I was just killing some time, flipping through the computer, and I noticed a posting from my daughter-in-law from 9 years ago. She said, 9 years ago, our little baby was born, my first granddaughter. She turned 9 this week. The testimony from my daughter-in-law reminded me of the greatness of God, because you see, my first granddaughter was given a 90% chance that she would not live past birth. Did you hear we celebrated her 9th birthday this past week? Yeah. And she's healthy and strong and beautiful. And every time I see her, I'm reminded that as hard as things might be right now, God has been faithful. He is faithful. He will be faithful. Continuing in verse 25 through 28. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day. He made for them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone shall be for a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord which he spoke to us. Thus it shall be a witness against you, so that you do not deny your God. Then Joshua dismissed the people, each to his inheritance. Joshua has brought them through remembering how God has brought you to where you are now, and God is now moving you in the next stage, but you need to go to the next place in your relationship with God. And they say, we want to go there. And he says, then it's important that we memorialize this commitment. There is something really good and right and strong about memorializing commitments. You already know that. Many of you are wearing a ring on a specific finger on your hand to memorialize a commitment. So let me ask you, is that ring important? Turn to your spouse and say, yes, it is, okay? Because otherwise you're in trouble, all right? I can guarantee you they think it's important. So, to help you continue to move forward, to help you to remember your commitments, it's important to memorialize it. In Scripture, there are so many times in the history of the Israelites that God had them cross the river and had held the water upstream. And he said, take these big stones out and stack them up over here so that every time you pass by and you see those stones when you're older, when the years have gone by, and when you forget how great God has been, you will see those stones and you will be brought back to the time that God parted the waters and you went through. And when your kids say, what's that pile of rocks over there, Dad? You can say, let me tell you about our God. It is important to memorialize big decisions, big movings in your life.